Hello everybody. This video discusses the right to travel and choose our own means of transportation without begging the state for permission. Now you might be thinking, don't states have the authority to limit how we travel? Well, that's exactly what we're going to explore today. We're talking about our right to move freely within our country and how we choose to do it. Now here's the thing. The right to travel isn't explicitly mentioned in the US Constitution, but guess what? Neither is any limitation on our mode of transportation. But that never stopped the Supreme Court from recognizing the right to travel as a fundamental right, so why wouldn't it recognize our ability to choose the mode of transportation in which we exercise the right to travel? So why do states think they can tell us how to get around? States have a tendency to make people believe they have the authority to limit our ability to choose our own means of transportation, and they often try to restrict this right, especially when it comes to suspended licenses for unpaid fees or fines. They take away our driver's license, giving you and us the impression that they have the right to tell you, what your means or your mode of transportation will be, right? But is this really true? Can the state always, in every circumstance, limit our mode of transportation? It's a good discussion to have if you want to leave a comment in the comments section. So just a quick heads up, if you've got drunk driving convictions or you tend to cause damage or harm to others on the roads, this conversation might not really apply to you. This information is for those interested in moving about in a private capacity, not for hire, and with no intent to harm or damage anyone or their property, all while doing it under the current legal framework, and this is by no means legal advice. So now, under the U.S. Constitution, treaties are the supreme law of the land. And this is found in the Supremacy Clause, which is Article 6, Clause 2. Here's what it says. This Constitution and the laws of the United States which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made, or which shall be made under the authority of the United States, shall be the supreme law of the land. Shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby. Anything in this Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding. Again, it said, all treaties made shall be the supreme law of the land. Let that sink in. All treaties. Now, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, or ICCPR, is a treaty that the U.S. signed in 1992, and they ratified it in 1992, and according to the Constitution, this treaty is the supreme law of the land. Article 1, Section 2 of this treaty says, all people may, for their own ends, freely dispose of their natural wealth and resources. In no case may a people be deprived of its means of subsistence. In no case may a people be deprived of its own means of subsistence. And I will read that again. This is from the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, Article 1, Section 2. All peoples may for their own ends freely dispose of their natural wealth and resources without prejudice to any obligations arising out of international economic cooperation based upon the principle of mutual benefit and international law. In no case may a people be deprived of its own means of subsistence. And did you hear that? It says, in no case may a people be deprived of its own means of subsistence, not the government's means of subsistence for the people. So let that sink in as well. In no case may a people be deprived of its own means of subsistence. It didn't say in some cases the state can limit your means of subsistence. It said in no case. And I believe I'm on point in thinking that the provision stating without prejudice to any obligations arising out of international economic cooperation based upon the principle of mutual benefit and international law doesn't directly impact your right of self-determination when you're not causing harm to anyone. It's more about protecting people's rights and resources in the context of international economic cooperation, not about restricting individual rights domestically. To the point of of states' interpretations, states would probably like to interpret the means of subsistence clause narrowly, just like basic food, water, and shelter. But the ICCPR's language is broader than that. It's about people having control over their resources and how they use them, which certainly includes transportation in this day and age, right? In this day and age. Importantly, in a 2022 case, New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin, okay, even though it is a Second Amendment case, it discusses an important point that I want to bring up. Justice Thomas's decision represents a shift towards prioritizing the text and historical understanding of constitutional provisions rather than relying primarily on recent precedents or interest balancing tests. Okay, so and that applies to the whole right to travel. Okay, it aligns. Justice Thomas's decision aligns with the idea that constitutional rights should be interpreted broadly in favor of individual liberty, and then this relates back to the ICCPR, right, the International Covenant on Political and Civil Rights, and how the definition of means of subsistence, right, should be construed broadly in favor of individual liberty and not narrowly. Um, so now the ICCPR is non-self-executing in the U.S., and that means basically that it's not directly enforceable in our courts without implementing legislation. But here's the kicker. Despite the non-self-executing status, right, the U.S. still has an obligation to comply with and implement the treaty's provisions. Now, let's talk about why the U.S. has to follow the ICCPR. When we ratified it in 1992, it became part of our supreme law of the land under the Constitution's Supremacy Clause. This means we have to treat it like any other federal law, with some exceptions called RUDs, reservations, understandings, and declarations. One of these RUDs says the treaty isn't self-executing, which limits people's ability to sue based directly on the treaty. But here's the kicker. The ICCPR doesn't just apply to the federal government. It covers all government entities and agents, including state and local governments, and even private contractors doing work for the government. The Senate made it clear that while the feds are responsible for implementing the treaty where they have jurisdiction, state and local governments are on the hook too with federal support. And I believe that the Supreme Court case law on the right to travel, along with federal statutes like 42 U.S.C. 1983, already work to implement the Article 1, Section 2 provisions of the ICCPR. So it's not just about the treaty itself, but how it aligns with and reinforces existing protections in our legal system. So we use the existing protections in our legal system as the main source that we sue on if you need to sue, but you can actually bring up the ICCPR as a treaty. Yeah, it's a treaty. It's the supreme law of the land, and we already have statutes and constitutional provisions as well as case law that we can use to implement the provisions of the ICCPR. So what does this mean for us and for those that wish to travel freely without being encumbered by state statutes, state regulations that work to circumvent all these constitutional protections? Basically, it suggests that without probable cause, no state should be able to make laws that limit your own mode or your own means of transportation. This interpretation aligns with both our constitutional freedoms and our international obligations under the ICCPR. The Supreme Court has consistently upheld the right to travel, you guys, and even though it's not explicitly in the Constitution. So this sets precedents for protecting rights that aren't spelled out word for word, like, for example, choosing your own means of travel, your own mode of travel. And just as the Constitution doesn't explicitly mention the right to travel, it also doesn't specify any limitations on the mode or means of transportation. This absence of limitation is significant. There's even evidence, guys, supporting that we can travel with self-made plates under the right to travel if you know your rights and how to stand up for them. You've seen the videos, I'm sure. And it does actually work. You just have to understand the law. And remember, this is a complex area of law, and you need to be well informed before taking any action. And this is not legal advice. But in conclusion, I'd like to state that while the entire legal landscape around this issue is complex, the principles are clear. Our right to travel, including our choice of transportation, should be protected from arbitrary restrictions as plainly articulated in the supreme law of the land, aka the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. It's about personal liberty and our ability to live our lives essentially as we see fit, with harm to no one, to pursue happiness and prosperity. Um, and remember, understanding our rights is the first step in protecting them. Okay, and I encourage you guys to dig deeper into these topics. I am leaving links in the description for more information. I'll drop links to the ICCPR as well as a couple of other tidbits of information or research that I pulled to draft this quick little vlog for you. And basically, thanks for watching, and let's keep the important conversation going in the comments below. Thank you.